Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have Emily Woodason on the show. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, Julian. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you on. It's a slightly different episode today. I'm interviewing somebody who's just done an amazing challenge, but I think there's some real lessons in terms of teamwork, resilience, and leadership, really, in terms of how you manage a task, whether you're I won't give it away in the moment, doing something at sea or doing something in an organisation. So, Emily, by day, you are a landscape architect. However, you've just completed the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge, a 3,000-mile rowing race across the Atlantic, which is just fantastic. And I'm going to say congratulations on that. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite an achievement.
It's a huge achievement, a massive achievement. And so your team, One Ocean crew, crossed the finish line on the 21st of January this year. And you did it in 40 days, 4 hours and 7 minutes. And there was a final push at the end where actually you became the winners of the women's class and the Murden Trophy. So again, well done on that, on winning the female class. And just to give some other context to this story and to this sort of challenge, apart from it being 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean, they say on average each team will row about 1.5 million oar strokes during a race, which is just phenomenal amounts. You may experience up to 20-foot high waves, and on a daily basis, I think you burn about 5,000 calories per day, which is huge amounts of calories you're burning, which means you've got to get those calories in somehow. And the average rower loses about 8 kilos in weight. And I think you as a team lost about 37 kilos amongst the four of you. So a big achievement and a big challenge. And I guess my first question really, apart from thinking, why did you take on this challenge? What was the inspiration? What got you to get to that sort of start line and decide to go off and row 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean?
Well, I guess firstly, I've always just been a lover of challenges and seeing how I can push myself mentally and physically in other ways. I've actually sailed across the Atlantic previously, and I've loved being out there in the middle of the ocean. It's such an incredible environment, and you are literally subject to nature. So you're just reliant every day on the wind conditions, the waves, what's going on. So you're taking those challenges head on every day. And being out there is a very different experience to sitting in a desk and doing the job I do, where every day we're planning ahead and thinking 2 months, 3 months, a year, 2 years, up to 5 years ahead with projects and plans. Whereas when you're on the ocean, you're reacting constantly to the environment around you. And so just putting myself in those kind of positions is just real change from my everyday life. And I really was desperate to sort of get back out on the ocean and experience it again. And the rowing was just, I guess, a sort of step further than sailing, a lot more physical, a lot more mental, and it would be a lot tougher to do. So it's something I guess, was the next step for me, and something that I really sort of wanted to try and see if I could achieve that and put myself in a position where I was facing things that I was uncertain about how I would conquer those, how I would achieve that and do that.
It's interesting. It was like a next step to you and a logical step to you, but perhaps not everybody else. Such an obvious step to take, and obviously a huge step. Interesting. You talk about sort of channeling yourself and in terms of your mindset. What was it about this particular challenge that made you think actually that's going to really push me the boundaries of my comfort zone and everything else?
Well, I mean, to begin with, I didn't know how to row. So I do love water sports and anything on the water, but I've never rowed in my life before this challenge. And so when I first heard of it and first saw these people and teams crossing the Atlantic in tiny boats, sort of 8-meter long boats, I thought that's absolutely insane. I thought I would love to do that. But I just, to begin with, I couldn't see myself doing it because there was so much I didn't know and so much I'd have to learn. but eventually I started researching into it and started sort of thinking about the ways I could do it, and went to a couple of lessons and courses to row at Putney down on the River Thames in London, and loved being on the water, and thought, okay, maybe if this is the first step, then I can just sort of gradually keep taking it step by step, and begin to sort of learn all these different components of it. And gradually it became a bit more of a sort of realistic challenge. But it was certainly at the beginning something that I did think was out of my reach, just because I didn't feel I had the right skill set at the beginning to do it.
And so when you, that was a couple of years ago when you sort of obviously heard about the challenge, did you make a commitment to do it before you even learned to row? Or was that you learning to row as the sort of understanding whether I could do this and the challenge became a bit more real and achievable? Or was what came first?
A little bit at the same time. So I saw the challenge and started researching into it, and I thought at that point I'd better get a bit of a flavour for rowing to see if I actually enjoy rowing to do this. But at the same time, while I was doing research, I came across a post online on a website called Explorers Connect, where people are looking for others to join their team of challengers. And Jen, who's the skipper of our team, had posted that she was looking to form a crew. So at the same time as setting myself up to go on this course in Putney, I also emailed Jen and said, this sounds fantastic. Absolutely love to be part of your team. Can we meet up? Of course, the next sort of challenge occurred at that point. That this was in March 2020, so around about the same time, lockdown occurred, and so all of my rowing in Putney got postponed. And meeting Jen was all online at the beginning, so it was trying to take those things step by step. But yeah, they all came at once, really, at the end.
And obviously the challenge itself is huge and a great accomplishment, but actually just getting to the start line in December was probably not easy. The fact that you had the pandemic, difficult to train, difficult to meet up, do those team things. What are the sort of challenges besides the ones I've just mentioned there that you faced, and how did you overcome that, and what was it in you that kept you going? Because that's quite a long time, a couple of years pursuing a goal, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we really struggled. So originally we were looking to do the race start in 2020 at the end of the year, but we actually had to postpone due to the pandemic. So that sort of brought an extra year into our training program, and something we hadn't really planned ahead. And at that point, when we had to defer our race, we did lose a couple of team members and had to look for more team members to take their place, just because keeping up that same momentum for training, fundraising, everything was really tough and really hard. Alongside that, I think one of the biggest challenges, and the thing that I was most nervous about at the beginning, is that as a team, we didn't have the opportunity to meet in person for the first sort of few months of getting together. So we were talking like this online, training together on our rowing machines, like all plugged into the screens, watching each other and chatting. But the first time we met in person was really quite nerve-wracking at that point, because we'd all committed to do this challenge together, but weren't sure if we'd actually get on in person. Luckily, when we met, we all got on straight away. It felt like we had known each other for a long time. And I think the thing that really brought us together was just our commitment to this challenge. All four of us are from very different backgrounds, but all four of us, for different reasons, we wanted to do this so much, and we all had so much passion and energy. We all had different skill sets as well that we could contribute and put in towards the campaign in different ways. So I think that really kept us strong and kept us going. And when the training got tough, because it was pretty relentless, when the fundraising got tough, we could all rely on each other at that point. And it was fantastic that different points in time, different ones of us would sort of step up, and others might be sort of really struggling, but we would push and help each other through. And that was really, I think, where we started to become really strong as a team.
Yeah, because you all had probably an individual reason to do it, that sort of why and the purpose behind individually. And obviously you came as a team. How did that sort of, I guess, that team start to sort of build? And I guess, was it through those challenges that you started to grow and realize, actually, if somebody's struggling with something or somebody who's excelling, did that start to build that team dynamic? Because there must have been some, I appreciate you weren't meeting in person until sort of near the actual race. There must have been some clashes or some difficulties or moments where it's like, can I spend 40 days with these people on a boat and that's all I see?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we one of the first challenges we did together online was a 24-hour row. And that was part of our fundraising. We did that online live, and so people were joining us throughout the night. But that was really difficult, and at that point, I think we sort of saw each other push through and work through that. So at that point, we're all there, sort of learning and starting to support each other. And then finally, we managed to buy our boat. And so as soon as we had our boat, we were meeting up as much as we could every weekend over the summer before the race and going out. So we were taking sort of long weekends, so from the Friday night through to Sunday, spending time on our boat together. And that was really where we got to know each other really well. It's a small space, as I said, an 8-meter long boat, so you can't get away from each other. And you have to face challenges, differences of opinion and things head on. And of course, we came up with those things, but we agreed from the start that what we wanted to be as a team was open with each other. And we agreed that we wanted to talk things through, and we sort of valued each other's opinions. That was really helpful. Later on, we did have a sports psychologist who came on board to help us. And that was fantastic as well. And we did a few exercises with her to understand really the different components of our personalities, our strengths, weaknesses, and how we all behave under pressure. And that exercise really helped us to understand where we needed to support each other and where our strengths lie as well. And from that point on, that enabled us to have some quite honest conversations about things that we found challenging, particularly when we were tired, hungry, generally worn out. They're the low points. They're the points where you do end up clashing because it's difficult at those points and you can't help it. But by understanding, what it was that pushed each other's buttons and how to help resolve that situation, whether someone needed a break or someone needed a hug, working through those things together was really, really beneficial. And that was something that we implemented in the race and I think was just invaluable to do before we started.
Yeah, because bringing a group of people that you'd never met before, or even when you come to an organization, you get part of a team, it's important to understand not only ourselves, but other people, isn't it? And to get that sort of insights into what's the best way to communicate, what are people's reactions under pressure, and what do they do? Do they go into the shell? Do they start shouting or whatever it is, throwing things? There's various things, and I think that's really helpful, and particularly when you're in a confined space and in a real pressure situation. And just before we get onto the boat, we're not even on the boat yet, and so it's like the pre-race bit here. If you were to look back up to the point you got on the boats, was there anything you would do differently? Is there anything you think, oh, actually, and that could almost be advice, not just to other people doing a similar challenge, but also advice to other teams when they come together in such a way?
I think some of the most valuable parts of our training were spending time on the boat together. And so it was going through all of our drills, how we worked on the boat, our rowing patterns, everything like that. And all of those components, the more we did those, and particularly when it came to safety, so practicing man overboard and different safety procedures and things, that all helped us gain confidence. So gain confidence in each other and how we worked as a team, but also in our boat and all of our equipment. And we did, luckily, despite the lockdown, because we pushed really hard to align our calendars and get out as much as we could every weekend and take a week as well at one point. That was something that I think when we got to the start line was just so beneficial to have. It was that it just sort of reduced the element of fear when we're there. Having said that, I think we could have done more time. it was really sort of difficult to get that time out and spend time together. But I think if we'd had more opportunity to spend perhaps another sort of week on the boat and practicing those days and night shifts, I think that would have been something that really, really would have helped us even more. So there would have been less adjustment time to life on the water, to everything we had to do when we were out there. So I think you could probably never have enough time doing that, the training and putting yourself as much as possible into that sort of situation that you're going to be in as you can.
Because the team bit is really important, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure you were all physically working hard in terms of doing your rowing training, the physical aspects, but the actual team dynamics is really a thing that probably makes or break it, doesn't it, really, in terms of the challenge itself? Because if that all starts falling apart, then no matter how resilient you may be as an individual, you need each other as a team to get yourself across. And so actually that value of spending time socially as well as doing the actual activities is really important. And during that time before you got to the start day, was there any element of doubt along the way, as in, oh, can I do this? Can we do this? And how did you deal with that? I'm interested to see whether you had any doubt, but if you did, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest doubt we had, and collectively we all felt at one point, was that we weren't going to make our fundraising target. So we needed to raise around £170,000 to begin with, to enter the race, buy our boat, buy our equipment, undertake training courses, buy all of our food for all of the journey. And it was a huge amount to raise in the middle of a pandemic when, understandably, funding was going elsewhere as it needed to. So it was really, really tough. And there was a point where we were at a make or break situation. And we had to raise a certain amount of money to get our boat in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make the race. And having postponed it a year already, it was really hard. And I think at that point, we all felt probably one of the lowest we felt. And I think we sort of racked our brains. And in the end, we sought advice and guidance on how we could actually do a bit more promotion and sort of different ways that we could bolster our campaign and push harder. Following that, it was 3 months of really intensive work, pulling together all of our resources. This was a sort of year before the race start, to launch a crowdfunder. And that crowdfunder was successful, but it was really, that point was probably the most tense that we'd had. And all of us were really thinking, can we do this? Is this the point to just leave it a day and call it quits? But we were so, I think, determined, we had it on our mind that we were, this is the final push. It's now or never. And luckily we pulled through. And again, that's where we used all of our different strengths, so split up all of the tasks in hand, but we were sort of working round the clock, finishing our day jobs, and then pushing hard to do various promotions, organise events, and everything that we could to sort of sell it in this all or nothing crowdfund to get our boat funding.
And how did you help each other in that situation when you were, perhaps some days you were perhaps a little bit doubtful this is not going to happen? 170,000 is a huge amount of money. How did other team members rally you, and how did you rally them? What were you doing, and what was was it just going back to the common goal you were after in terms of, we want to achieve this massive challenge? That's our source of inspiration and energy. How did you help each other?
It was always looking to the bigger picture, but we live on different areas of the UK, so meeting up wasn't easy, particularly in the lockdowns. But we made sure we met at least once a week to kind of go through our to-do list, and just a simple action sometimes of having things that we were ticking off and seeing that we were making progress, because looking at the whole thing and everything we had to achieve just seemed mammoth. But by sort of breaking it down to smaller chunks and dividing it between us really helped. And then weekly we'd give each other updates, and just seeing actually what the other team members had achieved, even if I felt this week nothing has gone right, nothing has happened that I wanted to do. But meeting up with the other girls and finding out that they'd done all of these fantastic things and made real progress was, that really kept me positive, and it kept the momentum going. So we always knew that we weren't doing this just for ourselves, we were doing it for each other by this point. And so just sort of finding the hours in the day, I knew that, by ticking one or two things off, that I could message the other girls and say, this is done. I knew it would sort of take the pressure off for them. So that was a real motivator to keep us going, I think.
It's almost that accountability, isn't it? That weekly accountability, checking in on each other, but also being, as you celebrate success of others, you get inspired and thinking, okay, at least so-and-so is getting that done. We're making some progress here. And as you say, when you've got such a big goal, the goal starts the day you decide on this. It's not when you start rowing, it's way before that in terms of what you have to do. I mean, just to get to the start line was a huge challenge for you. In fact, you had to raise £170,000, do all the training, and a training as in terms of, how you navigate and everything else, and what you have to do with that. So when you got to that start line, and I'm sure you were very excited and very pumped and ready to go. What was your greatest fears of the whole trip? What was your set looking ahead, thinking, I'm not sure about if that happens or this happens, or don't know, what was going in your head at that point?
Yeah, I think for me it was the amount of time. I felt confident in what we had learned in our training, that we were prepared for as many eventualities as we could be, and we had between us the skills and the knowledge, the right equipment to deal with any sort of serious incidents or anything. We could take that on. But the biggest fear for me was how long we'd be spending in a small space. And I worried about being claustrophobic, being trapped in the cabin at night. It's quite hot conditions by the time you get across towards the Caribbean. And you have to have the cabin doors shut at all times, and they're tiny spaces. And I just thought, am I going to be able to cope being just on this boat where you can't really even stand up or walk around to stretch your legs? And I'm going to be trapped on it for, 40, 50 days. We didn't know either, because that would be dependent on the weather, how we were doing. So we didn't have an exact time frame. And that made me sort of quite nervous hadn't really experienced that in my life before. So that was a real unknown to me. And so that made me quite nervous.
So knowing that, how did you sort of prepare yourself, and how did you deal with that? Obviously you did deal with it because you accomplished it. So what sort of things were going in your mind to help you get through that?
I think firstly it was just thinking about things that I could do if I did get panicked and flustered. And there were sort of simple things that I planned and thought that I could do in such situations, like just breathing exercises, things that would help me stay calm if it did get into a situation where I ever felt panicked or worried. And then it was really just sort of focusing on us as a team, and the fact that I had the girls there to support me as well, and that I knew that we sort of planned ahead and thought of different things we could celebrate as milestones. So we'd all had sort of little surprises and things for Christmas Day, for New Year's Day, because we'd be out there over sort of December and January. So it was thinking of ways to break down the journey so it just didn't seem like a monotonous, long, endless 40 days. There were ways that we could sort of celebrate little successes as we went. So we thought about how we could celebrate reaching a certain number of miles, and things like that. And we also agreed to have a daily team meeting on the ocean. So it was just a chance where all of us would be on deck together. We'd all talk through how we were feeling. So we agreed in advance that we would sort of talk about how we felt as a number. So if for example, you ask someone how they're feeling and they say okay could mean, yeah, I'm really okay, or it could mean I'm okay, I'm not not really that good. It's quite difficult to tell. So we, at our team meeting, we'd check in with each other. 1 would be feeling really the lowest you've ever felt, and 10 would be feeling fantastic. And so it's things like that we planned to do, that I knew would help me communicate with the other girls how I was feeling, and that would then enable them to help support me if I needed it. So having all of those things in place before we left gave me more confidence that I'd be able to deal with anything that came up if I was sort of starting to get panicked or worried about the situation and where I was. I knew I could check in with everyone.
I really like the idea of that sort of daily meeting, and it sounds a bit crazy to be having a daily meeting because you're all on the boat and you're not really much, but actually to have a point in the day where you gather, and whether you do some planning in that, I don't know, other things and other bits and bobs, but actually ask each other, and that doing that 1 to 10 scale is so valuable. I think that's really important, because often we can, we're okay, or what's okay to you, what's okay to me. But actually putting a scale in, and also you get to understand where people are at. If there were 6 yesterday and perhaps they're 8 today, or things have improved, so you can see a movement, a transfer. So when somebody did say, was there moments when somebody said 1s and 2s? Did you have really low moments between?
Yeah, well, we definitely had a few.
And did you all like say at the same time, go, oh, it's really bad, it's a 1, it's a 2, or was there like some were at 6 and 7s and some were down at the 1s and 2s? So I'd be intrigued to understand. And if somebody was quite down, what did you do then? What was the sort of the drill that you decided how you're going to work with that, deal with that?
So it would there would be days where we'd all be feeling a little bit lower. That might be because we had sort of bad weather conditions that weren't favourable for us. It might have been because we'd seen that our competition was overtaking us and we were falling behind, and we were all very competitive. So that would be quite frustrating. But generally speaking, we wouldn't all be sort of at our worst at the same time. So if someone was feeling really tough, really sort of, bad on a particular day, we'd try and understand why. Sometimes it might have been just not feeling too good. The ration food we were eating was really difficult sometimes to eat it. It was all sort of freeze-dried food and things that you had to boil water, and so there were times that people just couldn't manage to eat the number of calories that you would need to keep you going for a day. So it would just be really sort of energy zapping if you weren't able to sort of hold all your food down and keep it in. So that might be something. So if that was the case, we'd try some ration swapping, give someone maybe a sort of chocolate brownie or something for the day, just to give them a bit of an energy boost and help them out. Or if it was just, something that happened, something was on their mind, we'd let people sort of talk things through, and we'd find ways to try and cheer people up. Or it might have been making them a cup of tea. We had little whiteboards in our cabins, so sometimes we'd write messages to our cabin buddy, just with a little poem or a bit of a sort of inspirational thought or something, just as little gestures between us to try and sort of boost each other up and keep the mood higher.
Wow, that's really good. But it's using that insight from those numbers and then acting upon it appropriately to the situation. Now, normally in this race, you get the trade winds, which make it a little bit easier for you. I still think it's a challenge, but they sort of push you along a little bit. And I know at day 7, this is a quote that was on one of your Instagram, said, "Everyone is struggling with motivation at the moment, as the wind we were expecting is just not coming." So what were you thinking? Oh my goodness, we had a plan, and we planned it based on this trade wind that everybody gets every year, and now the plan is not happening. And so how did you sort of respond to that? Motivationally wise, obviously quite struggling with it, but how did you deal with that to keep going and to keep persisting? And that ultimately obviously became the winners in the female class.
It was definitely, I think, the toughest point in the race for me, particularly. So when you're rowing and the water is flat, calm, it was at points like this, it was like a mill pond. We could have been rowing on a lake, and it's wonderful.
That sounds amazing to me, Emily. That really does. Me rowing on a lake, flat, the ocean. I could be quite happy with that.
It was beautiful. It was stunning. And while you're sleeping and eating, it's fantastic because you're calm and you can do those things much easier. But when you're rowing, you are literally pushing the boat along every stroke. And when our boat was fully loaded, it weighed over a ton. So 2 people rowing at a time, we had to step up and have 3 people rowing at a time, which meant we went from 2 hours sleep to just 1 hour's sleep and rest after rowing for 3 hours each. So we had to do that really to keep propelling ourselves through the water. It was much harder to move the boat without any wind or current behind us. And so at this point we were particularly in sort of, it felt like the center of the wind hole. So we started to see other teams overtake us as well, where they had a little bit more wind because they'd gone a bit further south. So it was really, really sort of disheartening after working very hard at the beginning to push out and strike out into the lead to suddenly see us falling back. It was a real sort of blow to motivation. And I think the hardest part is that we had regular reports coming in from our sort of weather router on our team back home via our satellite comm saying, don't worry, the wind is coming. So every day we thought, okay, we just need to push through today and tomorrow the wind will be here. And of course it wasn't. It didn't come for days. So in the end, it got to a point where we all agreed together at our team meeting. We said, okay, let's not rely on the wind coming tomorrow. Let's focus on each day. And I think at that point we started our countdown to Christmas. And so instead of countdown to when's the wind coming, we just changed our focus and we started thinking, let's look forward to Christmas. We're nearly there. We had a couple of really small gifts and things from our families and friends that we were going to open on the day. So we started sort of talking about that and planning how we'd enjoy that day. And that sort of change in attitude and change of what we're aiming for really helped. And then we started enjoying ourselves a lot more, really sort of embracing the positives of glorious sunsets, amazing phosphorescence in the calm water, being able to eat and sleep in comfort. So just sort of putting out of our mind for a while the fact that we're in a race and waiting for the wind and just changing the focus was the way we got through that.
Oh, that's great. That's a great reframe. It really works every time when you reframe something. And also the fact that you started to focus on the good things that you were having, calmness. It was not as rocky, and you could eat in more comfort. It's a really good way of overcoming some challenges. And also, you then probably got onto things you could control, because you can control the wind as much as everybody said it's coming. You had no control over that, and what you could control was your mindset, your focus, and your rowing, and that's all you could do. That's a wonderful example of just taking a challenge and a plan and then adapting it and being quite agile. That's brilliant. What a great lesson. That's a great. Day 16. This is the competitiveness of you guys that came in. I'm going to read it. This is from one of your posts. It says, the last few days have been pretty frustrating, seeing our position drop from the top 10 down to the 16th and losing our lead in the female class after putting all our efforts in to push away hard at the start. Can't work out what's causing us to slow down and how we get those knots back up. So you clearly were competitive. You didn't want to just complete this task. You wanted to win it. Again, what was the plan there? You were falling behind. Probably the wind was impacted. You went in a slightly different direction than in terms of approach than everybody else. How did you pull that back?
That was a really tough point, and we spent a lot of time talking about what are the other team doing. It was another 4-woman team. They were a fantastic team, all rowers by background, and so we were thinking, they've really got this advantage over us. They're much better technically than we are, because 3 of us had just learned to row for this challenge, so didn't have a rowing background. And we spent a lot of time dwelling on what they must be doing, what their tactics were, whether they were rowing 2 up or 3 up, what kind of hours and patterns they were doing. And it got to the point where, again, we had to stop ourselves and say, whatever that team's doing, we cannot control it. We've got no impact over that. Let's refocus on what we're doing here and now. And we started to think about, okay, we'd rowed quite heavily with 3 up. So again, that's taking less rest time and more rowing time. And we sort of started to think, actually, what can we do, or what can we change so that we can start doing that again and start pushing again. And so we started to break it down. I thought, okay, well, in the heat of the day, it's really hot, so midday, so we can only really be rowing 2 hours, then you need a break, you need to get out of the sun. But our best times, and the times that we all enjoy rowing the most, are the first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening, just before it gets fully dark. I thought, okay, if we start doing a couple of hours 3 up, then pushing a bit harder, and we called them our power hours. And that was when we all really focused, and we sort of channeled all of our competitiveness into those hours and started pushing each other during those times. So it's not to say that we weren't pushing hard the rest of the time, but during those hours, we started really pushing each other on and talking about our technique, trying to improve. And while it was focused and concentrated in a sort of couple of hours, every 12 hours, it was just much easier to really sort of see the speed go up, see us progress, see us improve, see us start communicating more, working better. And I think ultimately that had a knock-on effect then to the time that we were more relaxed rowing, as it were, because we had improved our technique during that time. So it just kept the momentum going. And then slowly we started to pull out of this negativity just by seeing that the way we were working was improving our speed, and we were picking up pace, and we were doing it in a way that we weren't sort of pushing our bodies to exhaustion and suffering too much. We're doing it in a way that was manageable, but it took a while to get that balance and find out how we could play to our strengths and make that work best and most effectively for all of us.
It sounded like a strategy that was quite sustainable as well. The fact that you'd worked out these 2 moments in the day when you could really go for it, which gave you the focused energy. And for those listening, you've rowed 2 hours on, 2 hours off. That's the sort of normal way of rowing, is it, on these? So it's constant. There's somebody rowing all the time. So I don't think people always understand the concept of this. And the fact in those 2 hours, you've got to eat, sleep, rest, and all those sort of things as well. And so, yeah, that's important to know. So when you must have faced other challenges besides being behind the sort of the leaders at the time and no wind. What was the biggest challenge, you think, of the actual race that you faced?
I think it was the sheer amount of time we were out there. So ultimately, overall, the race took us 40 days. But after the first week at sea was very much adjusting to life on the water. So there's a bit of seasickness in the team to begin with, and that lasted 3 days for some of us. But after getting over that, it was just getting used to the pattern. So getting used to eating every 2 hours, just trying to get calories in, trying to get snatches of sleep as much as you can, which obviously takes a while for your body to adjust to, and just getting used to that non-stop rowing. We'd done a training row for 4 days previously. So after that 4-day point, everything was new to us for the length of time. So week 1 went quite quickly. It was very much just adjusting to life. Then week 2 was more about, we had the confidence in the boat. We knew how everything worked. It was going quite well. Then it suddenly, midway through week 2, there was that realization of how long this was actually going to be on the water in a small place, and how do you sort of look to the finish line? Something we'd sort of practiced with our sports psychologists and thought about as a team was visualizing the finish line, and that was a great goal to have in mind and something that keeps you sort of motivated. But when we were out there, that finish line seemed so far away and so far in the distance that it sort of became hard to visualize it when you knew you still had 4 weeks to go. And it already felt like you'd been out there a long time. So we started then again to break it down. So we would start to think of targets. So getting to 1,000 miles was a real target, and we really celebrated that. We had a fantastic little party on our boat on New Year's Eve with a disco ball, a little shot of whiskey in our coffee, and some good tunes on.
And where were you on New Year's Eve? Where did you sort of see the new year come in then?
We were pretty much, I think, about in the middle of the Atlantic at that point. So that was must have been around the sort of just after the halfway mark, I think.
Wow, literally in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and a really, really long way to go still. But we had to break it down. The days were going incredibly slowly in some respects, when you were just sort of looking into how long have we got to keep this momentum up, and that was a struggle.
And what did you learn about yourself in that sort of 40 days? And you're probably learning still now, I'm sure, as you reflect on that event.
I definitely learned that my body's much stronger physically than I ever thought in terms of its resilience, that I can just, things might hurt. Literally, there'll be days where every single muscle would hurt, but it could keep going. And mentally, I think I realized I had a little more strength than I thought, and just getting up every 2 hours, particularly at night when you're really sort of curled up in the dark in your cabin, and it felt pretty comfortable having to get up and get on the oars and sort of row. That was really challenging. But I think I sort of surprised myself that possibly wasn't one of the biggest challenges I was expecting, that I could just sort of keep myself going. And that was partly because I knew I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing this for the other 3 women in the boat too, and we were all there together. And so without them, it would have been a lot harder. So I know very much that my motivation comes from working with others, and knowing that what I'm doing and what I'm pushing for is also for them too. So that's being that sort of team player, and that is definitely something I've learned a lot more about.
Yeah. And what were your sort of highlights along the way? What were those sort of wow moments of this is just amazing? There must have been some amazing moments.
Yeah, for me, it was when the wind came eventually. But experiencing some of those sort of 6-meter high waves, being this tiny boat, we bobbed around like a little cork, and the waves would take you up to the top and then spit you out.
Was that a highlight, a good highlight?
I loved it.
Really? Oh my goodness.
It was with a little bit of fear when a wave would come at you in the pitch black and hit you from the side, and you'd panic if you were going to capsize or what was going to happen. But that adrenaline, absolutely, I found it thrilling and really, really exciting. And then the wildlife was incredible. Seeing pods of whales just dive under the boat and play around. Seeing sharks in the water sort of cruising past. It felt a bit like Jaws. And turtles going past on the current eating jellyfish. It was just, those sightings, along with the sunrises and sunsets, were just something that I would never experience anywhere else.
Now, you just mentioned sharks there. Now, I know, I think this is correct, you have to go into the water to take off barnacles under the boat. Is that right? I don't know how often do you do that? Is that a daily thing, or is it a few days?
So we did that every 4 to 6 days. So
knowing the sharks, potentially, you still happily went in, and
that was pretty scary. You had to, we jumped in 2 at a time, but you were attached to the boat still by a rope, so connected on. And I think the sort of the way I managed to do it was just focusing on the task in hand. So you go in with a little scraper, like the ice scraper on your car, jump in and scrape these barnacles and scrape everything off the hull. So as long as I stayed focused on that, on the task in hand, then that sort of kept the visions of sharks coming out of the water out of my head. And meanwhile, the other 2 team members would be on deck, on lookout, one looking out each side, just to make sure there were no sharks or jellyfish or anything dangerous coming towards us. So yeah, it was again putting your faith in those the others as well.
Was that weird being in the water in the middle of the ocean? And was it a bit surreal? Was it magical, or was it just scary? Just want to get this task done and get back on the boat.
It was really, really surreal. You would, every time I jumped in, I'd take a moment just to look down and look around, and it'd be nothing but blue, just completely empty. And you just think, wow, we are literally in the middle of the Atlantic. Nobody is around us. The seabed below us when we're in the middle of the Atlantic would have been closer than land on either side. So that's a interesting thought. So very just strange. I think it made me feel so lucky as well that I had the opportunity to be out there and experience that, something that so few people get to do.
And would you sort of do it again, or something similar?
I'm not sure I'd do that again. I think I only need to row across an ocean once, but I definitely do something similar, 100%. I can't say no to challenges. I think it's, and I don't know what might be next, but I think as long as I've got great people around me, supporting me, both with me on the adventure and, you know, friends and family as well, who've shown their support, have been incredible. And with that network, I think anything's possible.
And is there anything of a seedling of what next in your mind you'd like to do yet, or that you haven't got over this one yet in terms of understanding and reflecting on it and consuming all the wonderfulness of it, what it was?
Yeah, I think at this point I'm trying to focus on just, you know, being present, enjoying normal life, enjoying work, enjoying hot showers and fresh food still, and a flushing toilet. But, you know, never say never. I'll probably start thinking about something soon.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's all about gratefulness, isn't it? For wherever we are, whether on a boat, you're grateful for wonderful sunsets and no wind, and even grateful for that. But actually now you're grateful for flushing water and all that sort of stuff. It's being in the moment, isn't it? Wherever we are, whatever we're doing, it's actually having that gratefulness attitude is the way to go about it. It's been lovely speaking to you today, Emily. I've really enjoyed it. I could talk more. I've got lots of more questions I'd like to ask you. And if people are interested to find out a bit more about you and a bit more what you did in your adventure, how can they find out that? Either through you or any other websites or Instagrams? What's the best way of doing it?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram at One Ocean Crew, and our website is oneoceancrew.org. So all our information's there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for today. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Julian. Great to speak to you.